I'm very binary. I either use a sniper rifle or like a machete. Hello, welcome to Sound and Fury Book Reviews. As usual, I'm Tina, and today I am doing a classic sci-fi book review of Andre Norton's Sargasso of Space. I posted a picture of this on Instagram, so if you are on Instagram, I would love to follow you, and I would love if you followed me. So I've included the link in my description to my Insta channel, or Insta feed, or whatever account. I don't know, I'm old, I don't know what I'm doing. So as usual with these book reviews, I'm going to do a regular book review with no spoilers, and then I'm going to do kind of a deep dive into the book and talk about some of the interesting things about it. This one definitely has a lot to talk about, and it was really fun. So, Sargasso of Space has a fascinating premise and well-developed world building. It's kind of the prime example of what a classic sci-fi kind of strove to be. So we have this guy named Dane Thorson, and he just received his first commission as a cargo loader apprentice aboard the spaceship the Solar Queen. After purchasing trade rights at an auction for this mysterious planet called Limbo, they head to the planet to see if their gamble of the purchase paid off. There's actually 3 sequels to this, which I learned when I finished. So there's a Plague Ship, Voodoo Planet, and Postmark the Stars. I forgot to say that I got this book from a used bookstore, of course, and it was published first in 1955. In my version, it only has the 1955 publication date, but I'm pretty sure this version is actually from like the 70s. Anyway, this novel was originally published under Andrew North, which is Andre Norton's pen name. Most classic sci-fi readers are aware of this, but Andre Norton is one of the most well-known of this era and a pseudonym for Alice Mary Norton. She actually changed her name legally to Andre Alice Norton later. Norton was the first woman to be a Gandalf Grand Master of Fantasy, an SFWA Grand Master, and to be included in the Science Fiction Fantasy Hall of Fame. So Andre Norton is a well-known name. The novel starts off very strong. You know, Dane and the universe, how the universe operates, are very well described and understandable. Dane does things that are relatable, his kind of misgivings about joining this crew when he had no other option, things like that. The mystery of the planet Limbo is really entrancing. I, for one, love forgotten alien relics as a plot device. I love it. Likewise, Limbo is technically a post-apocalyptic world, as it was abandoned after destructive war kind of centuries past by these other aliens. So for that, obviously, I found the premise and setting super cool. I was very much entranced by the novel until about halfway through when it started to kind of crumble for me. Unfortunately, the characters are a bit lacking. Like, Dane starts off really interesting, but other than making a few mistakes as a new recruit, he doesn't really struggle with much mentally. We don't hear, is he homesickness? We don't know anything about his family. We don't know anything about his plans for the future. Is he just going to be a cargo apprentice on a ship? Like, does he want to settle down ever? Like, where is his home planet? Is it Earth? He doesn't even get worried really about being trapped on Limbo. Like, we don't get any of that. And while the cast is really diverse in terms of race, the men are barely distinguishable from one another in terms of personality. Dane also has a mild issue with one of the men, Allie, but it never goes anywhere. I'm not sure it was even mentioned because, like, nothing, as I said, comes of it. I have a theory that I'm going to talk about later. I was also really disappointed that we learned nothing about the reptilian alien man in terms of culture. He just acted like a regular dude, and I was like, come on, something interesting. The last third of the novel grows increasingly less interesting, as I said, as it's a lot of running around in the fog and in these mazes, and there's no attempt to explain the science behind the discovery. And, you know, the antagonist's rationale was mentioned so briefly, it was pretty much mentioned in passing, and I found that kind of hard to care about. Okay. Along with these issues, which weren't terrible, the novel suffers very greatly in terms of gender representation. In this novel, women have been wiped out and men propagate based on cloning. No, I'm lying. This isn't true. But there are no women in the novel. No women at all. Like, no mention of women, nothing. I mean, they call the ships her because ships are possessions, just like trophy wives. But there aren't any women in the cast. I have no idea why. If Norton could imagine a world of racial diversity, she couldn't put women in the cast too. There are other many 1950s novels where women are featured, but I guess this isn't one of them. I kept waiting for one to show up. I was like, maybe, you know, Salazar's group, the antagonist, will have a woman in it. No. I said, maybe there'll be a woman for some reason hanging out in Limbo. No. This is very frustrating to me. As such, I give this book, based on the plot and the characters and everything, a 3 to 5 stars. It was, yeah, it just stopped enthralling me about halfway through. There's also a cat, though, in the book called Sinbad. It's on the spaceship, and there was a funny passage about the cat. Cats took to acceleration, to free fall, to all the other discomforts of starflight with such ease that there were some odd legends growing up about their tribe. One was that Domestica Felinus was not native to Terra, but had descended from the survivors of an early and forgotten invasion, and in the starships he was only returning to his former golden age. I thought that was kind of funny. Okay, so I'm going to move on to spoilers, but before we get to that, a word from our sponsor. The True Story. True Blue is lower in both tar and nicotine, and 99% of other cigarettes sold. True Green is too. Regular or menthol, doesn't it all add up to True? Regular or menthol, a lot of cigarettes have filters. Only True has this tar and nicotine reduction system, so unique it's patented by the US government. Patent number blah blah blah. True is lowest in both tar and nicotine of the 20 best-selling brands, lower in fact than 99% of all other cigarettes sold. Think about it. Doesn't it all add up to True? I love that this isn't here. Okay, so onwards to my deep dive. If you don't want spoilers, this is the end of the review, and thanks for watching. If you do, or if you don't care, I'm going to talk a bit about the title, like what it means, the diversity a bit, the technology, some cool alien stuff, and my theory about Dane being gay. Spoilers! What's with the title? Well, it's probably named after the Sargasso Sea, which is a region of the Atlantic Ocean, which is, bound by 4 currents that form this ocean gyre. It has this special seaweed called sargassum, which floats across the surface. So until we could study it more scientifically, a few years ago, it was known as a mysterious place where ships are mired in by the seaweed for centuries, unable to escape. This is not true. But based on that knowledge at the time, it makes sense that there is a machine on Limbo that is used to pull ships into their deaths. So that actually makes a lot of sense. This title is actually quite cool. I already mentioned women in the novel. Can't say anything else about it except that it sucks, so that's that. Racial diversity, though, in this book is good. True, the main character and the captain are both white, but there are men of other races. I think they make up at least half the men, which is, way more than the token 1 or 2 that I was expecting, so that's awesome. They all play important parts, and there's nothing stereotypical about their behavior or how they act. This was really well done, and, there were 2 rather outdated, but not racist, I'd say, terms for someone of African descent and someone of Asian descent used at the start to describe how a person looks, but it clearly wasn't done in a way to denigrate the person, and it was probably just the scientific terms at the time. Anyway, so I can overlook that one, I guess. This was also the 3rd book I've come across which describes how Japan was wiped off the map by a natural disaster, so it's kind of funny, and hopefully it's not, a prophecy. So there's lots of tech mentioned in passing in the novel, but not explained in detail, which I kind of like. I like when they don't go through and explain every single little thing. There's under-surface transcontinental cars, neat. Force blades, okay. There's the crater war on Mars, sounds neat. The navigator is called an astrogator, because I guess that's what they made sense. It makes sense, it's just we don't call them that. And of course, there's small packets of microfilm, which were how the surveyors recorded their scans of the planet, which were given to the purchasing party to be used other than the microfiche. I also like that they call their police spaceships patrol battle wagons. That's super cool. Clearly the police were not defunded in this future. There's something called Psycho. I assumed it was a drug, like in Fallout, but it's not, unfortunately. It is a tool that psychoanalyzes a person in order to assign them a job. Apparently it picks a crew that would work well together on long journeys. I guess they don't really explain it more than that, but it was kind of interesting. You just go there and the computer spits out a little card at you and you look at it. I'm assuming it's a dot matrix printer, but still. So there's something called plague ships, which are kind of what you expect, but I like the explanation. plague ships were the terrifying ghosts of the space lanes, wandering derelicts, free-roving tombs holding the bodies of the crews who on some uncharted world had contracted some new and virulent disease, dying alone in the reaches of the heavens, perhaps by stern choice, before they could bring their infection to inhabited worlds. The solar system guards had the unenviable task of rounding up such drifting threats of death and sending them into cleansing suns or giving them some other final end. But here, beyond the frontiers of civilization, a derelict could drift for years, even centuries, before some freak of chance brought it into the gravitational pull of a planet and so crash it on an unwary world. Super, super cool. So there's, as I said, the sequel to this is called Plague Ships, and now I kind of really want that because of that explanation. I'm like, ooh, are we gonna find one? Anyway, the maze, which leads me kind of into, it's like a segue into the alien stuff, but the maze isn't really explained, and neither is the weapon. So if you haven't read the book, there is this kind of maze, and inside it houses this control room where there is a weapon or a machine that pulls spaceships down to Earth. I'm assuming using some kind of magnetism or some kind of tractor beam. I don't know. They don't really explain, like she doesn't really explain how this works, just that it does work. It would have been cool if we gotten a bit of a pseudoscience explanation for it. I think the concept is really neat, the kind of holding ships to the planet. Perhaps that's why the war that caused the post-apocalyptic conditions happened, because of this weapon. But I thought that was really neat, but I just wish it had a bit more explanation. Also, the maze didn't really make sense to me. Maybe I missed it, but I don't remember why or know why there was a maze and what the point of it was. So now I'm going to talk about my favorite thing, which is alien stuff. In this book, there's lots of aliens, but they aren't in the book, but they talk about them. One of them they talk about are the Forerunners. So apparently this is now Halo, but I mean, lots of science fiction calls these, Forerunners. The idea of Forerunners is that there are aliens that colonized worlds and left technology behind and then somehow vanished or disappeared or died out centuries or thousands of years before. And the civilizations that are around now or during the time of the book study these relics and things like that, but they don't actually know a lot about them. And I really love that concept of Forerunners. As soon as I saw Forerunners, I was like, yes, this is so cool. So yeah, the Forerunner tech is kind of what is dotted all over Limbo. We don't get to see a lot of it other than kind of the maze and the machine, but I kind of wish there was a bit more. There's other aliens called Regalians, and so I kind of complained about this in the review above, but there is a Regalian character in this book. I can't remember, I don't think he even has a name actually, but he's described as green, tinted, scaled, and hairless, but pretty much otherwise human other than having like cat-like eyes, which is kind of typical for this kind of time period in terms of what aliens look like. They didn't like to make them, they either made them like extremely different or they made them like pretty much like humans. So he doesn't get a lot of screen time. We don't learn anything about him, so that kind of sucked, but at least he was, there's alien representation in this book, but no women, so I don't know about that. There's a thing called the Twin Towers. These are not the ones that you expect. They're on planet Corvo, and they stand right in the center of a silicon desert. They're 200 feet high, looking like two big fingers pointing into the sky. Apparently they're solid, but they're not made of stone or metal, and this is all they say about them, and I'm like, that is so cool. I love when books like this, or sci-fi books, talk about random technology and they don't go into detail. I really like that. I think it really builds out the world and lets you kind of imagine it yourself. So there's the globe creatures on Limbo. Its body consisted of two globes, one half as large as the other. There are no discernible head at all. From the larger globe protruded two pair of very thin, four-jointed limbs, which must have been highly flexible. We don't really learn a lot about these creatures, what they are or what they're doing, but they definitely reminded me of the floaters from Fallout 76. Here's a picture of them. They're the worst in that game. They spew like acid or freezing or fire at you, so like from a distance. So unless you're good with the sniper rifle, which I am, you like have no choice against them. Or unless you go like brute force, which I also tend to do. I'm very binary. I either use sniper rifle or like a machete. Anyway, there's lots of references to other small, small alien creatures or people, like the Horbat, which is the captain's pet, which kind of reminded me of that bat Pokemon. I can't remember what it's called. Anyway, they call the aliens XTs, like X-TEEs. which is common for the time period. I just think it's funny. There's the Sliths that are reptilian, the Arvas are remotely feline, the Fiftocs are brachiopods, the Candoids and Mincis are insects, apparently, but we don't get to meet any of these things. Okay, so onto my speculation part. So I may be reading too much into this, but I have a sneaky suspicion that Dane is in the closet. So Dane has a problem with this guy named Ali. So when he first meets him, all he thinks is never before had he seen such a handsome daredevil face. Okay, that's cool. But then later on, he's like, and he was thinking of Ali, trying to analyze why he so much disliked the engineer apprentice. Ali's spectacular good looks and poise were part of it. Like, he never mentions how hot anyone else is, and he mentions this all the time in the book. He doesn't, but he's like, I don't understand why I don't like him. There's something about him that bugs me. And yeah, that can be true. Some people's faces just bother you, but I think that he's subconsciously masking his attraction to the man with a dislike. So this is my theory. I think it's fun. And then at the end, they're like hiding together and Ali breathed close to Dane's ear. I mean, yeah, whispering in this context makes sense, but the way it was framed seemed very intimate to me. So I think there's something like sexy going on between the lines, even if it's one-sided on Dane's part, and I found that very interesting. And also, Dane never mentions having a girlfriend or wanting a girlfriend or anything like that. But I mean, there are no women in this universe, so maybe that's why. But but I think this is my theory. I guess I'll have to read the next 3 to find out if there's any more of this, or if my theory is completely rejected, which is fine. I have one little quote from the book that I liked, and it says, "For there was no mistaking the cause of those brown-gray patches disfiguring the land masses. It was the leprosy of war, a war so vast and terrible that no Terran could be able to visualize its details." Ooh. Anyway, so that's Sargasso of Space, Andre Norton. If you really liked this book, let me know. If you've read this and found it kind of slow, that's cool too. If you've read the other 3, no spoilers. Yeah, just shout out in the comments what you thought about that. If you agree with my reading between the lines of Dane and Ali, you can comment on that too. Thank you for watching.